Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special combination Grid Live program. The wrap up and Encore teams are both here tonight. I'm Ben Schneider, alongside, as always, Brandon Crossland, and also joining me, Adam Lemerys, our supercars expert, and from the podium finish, Toby Lambeth. Great to see all of you. We hope everyone had a great weekend. Most racing series were off, but NASCAR's Truck and Cup Series were in action on the dirt track at Bristol. And we'll kick things off with a Cup race that had a few bumps in the road along the way, but ultimately gave the fans something to talk about with a dramatic finish.
Yeah, Ben, that was a really crazy finish, all things considering what happened earlier in the night. So if you stayed up for that, you saw a fantastic show at the very end. And it was the NASCAR Cup Series second event at Bristol Dirt, and it was a race against the rain. However, despite two rain delays, NASCAR was able to get in all 250 laps. Tyler Reddick was a couple of car lengths away from his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory. Chase Briscoe tried to throw a slot job on Reddick in turns 3 and 4, both drivers going for the win on the final lap in the final sets of corners. Then contact. Briscoe and Reddick, the leaders go spinning. Kyle Busch slides by from third to first to steal the Food City Dirt Race at Bristol. Starting with you, Brandon, how heartbreaking was it for Tyler Reddick to be so close to his first Cup win and have it taken away from him like that?
Oh man, Kobe, it was terrible. I mean, just having the whole end of that race just in the palm of his hands, and just like that, we get another classic Bristol finish coming out of 3 and 4, and Tyler Reddick, a victim of being second place again, almost had a spin and win after that contact with Chase Briscoe, but Kyle Busch just able to thread the needle and find a way right past him there at the line. Yeah, you got to feel heartbroken for Tyler Reddick, but also I really want to give him props for the way he handled things afterward with Chase Briscoe. They were able to come back to each other, laugh about it, and I think for at least for me and Ben, that's a lot more than we can say for some of the other topics we talk about around here on Grid Live Encore in the Xfinity series.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Brandon. Maybe after what we saw in the Xfinity race at Martinsville, maybe Ty Gibbs and Sam Mayer need to look at how Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe, after what happened, they were gentlemen about it. They shook hands. They understood what happened. But I feel so sorry for Tyler Reddick. He was so close to his first. He was so close for the win, and unfortunately, what happened between him and Chase Briscoe, well, um, you know, uh, all I gotta say is Kyle Busch snapped a long winless streak last night at Bristol, and so Tyler Reddick, I'm glad he and Chase Briscoe were gentlemanly about what happened, on the last lap at Bristol, and hopefully Ty Gibbs and Sam Mayer learn something about what happened on pit road between Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe at the end of the race last night at Bristol.
Yeah, for those two young guns in the Xfinity Series, Sam Mayer and Ty Gibbs, they should really look up to Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe to see how they handled that conflict in the best way possible, showing good sportsmanship. And I saw some people on Twitter after Briscoe and Reddick didn't fight. I was seeing comments like, "I've lost respect for both of them," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? You lost respect for them because they didn't start fighting on national television? Do I think some incidents and conflicts like that are good for the sport? Absolutely. But does every single conflict on the track need to end in a fist fight? Absolutely not. And this was one of the cases where it didn't need to end, and in both drivers throwing haymakers and all of that. And I thought it was really a good thing to see those two drivers talk it out, laugh, shake hands after the fact, because I think they were having a lot of fun racing out there. And it was super unfortunate the way Tyler Reddick lost that race, but I'm pretty sure he's going to get his first Cup Series win at some point this year, like Ross Chastain running so well, so close multiple times, and then he finally got the win. I think it's going to be easier for Ross to win moving forward, and once Tyler Reddick finally gets the monkey off his back, then he's going to have a much easier time winning races as well. Got a comment from Joe Samniego saying it was great to see both drivers shake hands and acknowledge that it was hard racing for the win. it was a breath of fresh air. I totally agree with you, Joe. And like I was saying, a lot of us probably expected to see them throwing it down on pit road and the crew members getting involved, but they all surprised us. I would know I was very surprised because I thought there was going to be a fight, but both drivers were really mature about it, and I'm sure they're going to move on from the incident. And one of the fastest cars all night long was definitely Chase Briscoe, who led the first 48 laps until he hit the wall and spun out. He recovered quickly to win stage two. After Briscoe and Reddick collided on the track, Briscoe, as I just mentioned, Briscoe found Reddick on pit road after the race, shook hands. Good show of sportsmanship when many people probably expected them to really throw down hard. Was Chase Briscoe's move on Tyler Reddick on the last lap too desperate, or is it understandable since it's the last lap of the race going for a win, and Briscoe essentially had nothing to lose since he's already in the playoffs?
Well, Kobe, it's the last lap, and you're going for a race win at one of the great tracks in NASCAR, Bristol Motor Speedway. Yeah, it's on dirt, but it's still Bristol. When you win at the last great Coliseum in hills of Eastern Tennessee, you can say you've joined a list of people that have won there. Names like Darrell Walter, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Sr., among others, who have won there. So, unfortunate, yeah, it was the last lap, but you were going for a win at Bristol. I feel sorry for Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe after they had strong cars all night long, but it's the last lap. You got to go for it no matter what. And well, we saw what happened.
I think I'd be a little bit more forgiving of Chase Briscoe's move if I had been in Tyler Reddick's position, if Briscoe hadn't already won a race this year. He's all set for the playoffs. Tyler Reddick is not. So that makes me even have a little bit more respect than I already had for Tyler Reddick for how he handled the situation. But, I think, Adam, like you mentioned, it is Bristol. So, it is a track that everybody wants to check off their list and say they won it. I think anytime that's the end result, we went through this a couple of weeks ago at Circuit of the Americas with Ross Chastain bumping AJ Allmendinger out of the way. There were some fans that think, a bump was certainly warranted, but when Allmendinger ends up stuck in the gravel and down in 33rd in the box score, maybe it was taken a step too far there. Whether it's intentional or not, it's just unfortunate how it ended up. But, Kobe, I'm completely with you. I think Tyler Reddick is certainly going to be a first-time winner at some point this season. Daniel Suarez as well had a great run. And, give a shout-out to Ty Dillon, the way Petty GMS is running this year. We may see multiple first-time winners, even more so than we've already had this season before the season's over.
Yeah, I think there's a great chance we'll see more first-time winners in the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series season. I think Chase Briscoe did exactly what he wanted to do. Try to go out there, get the win, get a second wing, move up there in the playoff standings. And if it didn't work out, oh well. He won at Phoenix, still in the playoffs, but Tyler Reddick had everything to lose right there because he's not in the playoffs yet. I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to secure his spot in the playoffs at some point this season. And I'm totally with you, Ben. I was really surprised how well Tyler Reddick handled the situation. I'm wondering if it would have been different if Briscoe had spun him out and went on to win the race, but I guess it was cool, since neither of them ended up winning. And after the race, Chase Briscoe said that he felt really terrible for Tyler Reddick because he knew when he got sideways in the corner, he knew it was spinning and then ended up hooking him. And Briscoe said if he couldn't win himself, he wanted to see a dirt guy win the race. So it was just super unfortunate incident, but both of those two young drivers are mature professional race car drivers, so I'm sure they're going to move on from this incident and just keep digging out there. And with the new cars, tires, adjustments, testing the new car on dirt with Stuart Friesen a couple of times, there were a lot of expectations on NASCAR to produce a better track this year with multiple grooves, lots of passes in the back of the pack, mid-pack, saw some close battles for the lead, and a few passes for the lead, but it seemed a lot harder to pass up front compared to mid-pack. Compared to last year, with the changes made to Bristol dirt, did NASCAR succeed in creating a more racier track?
Yes and no. I think, it was difficult to pass for the lead. I think that's something that we were maybe going to bring up on the show tonight as well. I think maybe that's a problem with the next gen car. We saw that in Martinsville, obviously. We still have a very small sample size when it comes to that. But, I think in terms of what we saw with the actual track prep needs to be better if we're going to continue to do this. We saw it at the beginning of the heat races for the truck series and the beginning of the actual cup race last night. We can't be doing this where we have a mandatory caution or we have trucks or cars that are clogging up on the front grills and overheating after just 10 or 15 laps. That being said, once the track did come in, I thought the racing was actually pretty decent. It was nice to see that a light rain or a mist, if you will, didn't completely wash the track out. I was expecting the track conditions to get a lot worse, a lot faster than they actually did. So I'm glad we were able to get the entire race in. So I think, was it better than last year? Yes, but I think there's still certainly a little bit of work we have to do in order to perfect the formula here if we're going to keep racing on the dirt at Bristol.
Yeah, Ben, I'm the same with you there. The passing for the lead up front was very much still a thing that was hard to do. I think overall, though, the product compared to last year's inaugural dirt event, it's definitely improved, but there's still more work to be done. I think they need to find a way to stop the engines from overheating the way they do. And also another comment I've heard, another concern I've seen is the visibility. If there's a way we can cut down the appearance of dirt fog, and if you will, getting in the way, and there's just little issues like that we got to take care of still. And I think still Eldora is the better venue, but I digress.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, brother. And think Eldora, Tony Stewart's crew definitely know how to set up a dirt track. All those years the truck series was racing at Eldora during the 2010s, we never saw any major issues at that racetrack. And if NASCAR just go hands off, let Tony Stewart's crew handle things, I'm sure Eldora could put on a really excellent NASCAR Cup Series race, or even the Knoxville Raceway. I know the truck series had a lot of issues there this year, and based on what they learned during last year's disastrous event, maybe the truck race this year at Knoxville will be a greater improvement. And talking about things improve, I definitely think NASCAR made some really good changes to Bristol dirt this year. I feel like overall the racing itself was a lot better than last year, and we didn't need to do the single file restarts because the track was so dusty. And you mentioned, Brandon, the visibility that was still a concern a little bit this race weekend, but not as big of a concern as it was last year. And if NASCAR is going to keep racing at Bristol dirt, that there's a lot of things that they'll have to work on for next year's event if they decide to bring it back. And we had 2 pauses in the action due to rain, 14 cautions, which isn't really that unusual for Bristol in general. However, the race started around 7 p.m. Eastern time and ended around 11, well, actually right before 11 p.m. Eastern. And someone wondering, and I saw this was a debate on social media, if NASCAR should implement a time limit to complete the race. Formula One has a 4-hour window with a 2-hour race limit. Formula E is a time race, and same for all sports car racing events. Is the idea of NASCAR implementing a time limit for certain races a far-fetched idea?
Yeah, it might be a little far-fetched. Maybe to the officials and those powers that be, it may not be that far-fetched, but I don't know if that's something that's proper for NASCAR with oval events. I don't know what kind of benefit that would have other than for the TV networks to have a time limit, so they know definitely this is when it'll be over and a winner will be decided. Usually NASCAR lets the rain do that for them, or in some cases the fog that I think the Chris Buescher Talladega win. But yeah, I don't know if that's something personally I'm ready to embrace, but it might be something later on down the line that they might consider.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brandon. I think it all depends on television windows and also television contracts. If you look at a typical NASCAR race, it's usually in a 3-hour to 3.5-hour window, 4 hours at the most. So they got to get the race in within that time. So a time race in NASCAR, well, I don't like it. But you mentioned Kobe Formula One, and me being a supercars expert here at Grid Network, I can say that the Red Coat Supercars Championship has had to have some timed races in the past as well. So, could we see a time race in NASCAR? Sure, but I don't think it'll happen for a long time to come.
Yeah, and we've talked about the other series that have had time limits, and another series that's had time limits in the past, but nothing recently, is the NTT IndyCar Series. I think it was a race at Barber Motorsports Park during the 2010s when IndyCar was running out of time or something with the lap limit, so they decided to implement a time limit. But as for time limits in NASCAR events, I really think that is a far-fetched idea. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But if they wanted to experiment with that, I think that's something they could potentially do on the road course events, because in sports car racing they all race on road courses. We see that work out for them. Maybe that's something NASCAR should consider. Maybe do like a 3-hour race where at the 1 hour mark, that's stage one, and keep it green, don't stop, and then hour two, that's stage two, and then the final hour will be the final stage. So I don't know. That's just my idea there, how they could implement a time limit, but I feel like that wouldn't really work out well on the ovals. But maybe something to consider for the road course races in the future. And speaking of the future of Bristol Dirt and their spring race weekend is really up in the air. A long time since they've had a sold out crowd. Lots of issues with the weather, and some drivers like Kevin Harvick were not happy racing on the dirt, who said the track wasn't prepared right at the start and it made them look like a bunch of bozos. Those are the words of Kevin Harvick. We had the confusion between the second stage break about who was leading the race, and Kyle Busch wasn't thrilled about the dirt race in general, although he, quote unquote, backed into the win. And here's a question for everyone. Should Bristol Dirt continue to host 2 races a year? And what's your take on the future of this race? And is it time for NASCAR to finally end this dirt experiment, or just try out a traditional dirt track like Eldora or Knoxville?
I'm going to try to avoid being too repetitive from what I said on the pre-race show this weekend, but my position hasn't changed based on what we saw this weekend. I still am not opposed to dirt racing in principle when it comes to modern day NASCAR, but I think it needs to be at a purpose-built dirt track with people that have experience, know what they're doing to prep the track and get it ready for stock cars or stock trucks, depending on which series goes there. I guess there's probably some Xfinity drivers that want in on the dirt action as well. Who knows what the future holds for Bristol or Knoxville, or if we could see Eldora come back, or any of those things. Did have some issues with the race last night with the Cup Series in particular. I said on Twitter I loved parts of it, I hated parts of it, but the start in particular really rubbed me the wrong way. The mandatory yellow, I thought it wasn't fair to the teams that knew how to prep the front end of their grills, but then weren't having the clogging issues. To neutralize the field in that respect, I think was something that, I don't know how much I like race control having that much of an impact in, determining the outcome of the race, right from the start there. Obviously the track prep should have been better in the first place to prevent this from even being an issue. And, we had the reigning Cup champion, Kyle Larson, who obviously has an extensive dirt background, calling for the windshields to go out. NASCAR never even entertained the idea there. They moved the start up 10 minutes to try to beat the rain, and then end up spending 15 minutes, with everybody on pit road making a mandatory pit stop to clean off the grills. So I feel like there was a lot of miscommunication. And then, that doesn't even get into everything that happened with the sorry, I'm losing my my train of thought here because there's so much to keep track of. Where were we with the oh my goodness, I'm going to keep going here. Just everything that went wrong with the track prep, I feel like was just it needs to be better if we're going to continue doing this experiment. The scoring, that was the word that I could not for the life of me come up with. The scoring issues, determining who was leading under the stage breaks and whether or not drivers, when they were coming into the pits, lost track position as opposed to drivers that stayed out. Apparently that wasn't true when we were under red, but as soon as they took the green flag again, it sorted out that way. It was just all so confusing for the drivers and teams at the track. You can think about how we as fans watching on television must have felt seeing all that go down. So there's certainly a lot that needs to be better thought out when it comes to this dirt experiment that we continue to go through here if we decide to do this again in 2023 and beyond going forward.
And we have a comment from our colleague Jose Miego. He says the 1998 season finale in Atlanta was a noon race that ended past midnight, I believe. NASCAR shortened the race because it took up so much time. Yeah, that is true, Joe. And I can say this to our viewers. I've been to Bristol on many, many occasions. And I can say Bristol easily should have two races a year. And to me, I think what NASCAR should do is, like my colleagues have said, is take the Cup race to a traditional dirt track. And you guys have mentioned Eldora. I mean, if the World of Outlaw Sprint Car Series can run there and be successful, why can't the NASCAR Cup Series run there? You guys mentioned the Camping World Truck Series has run there. There was a huge late model race called Prelude to the Dream, in which we had several NASCAR drivers compete in back in the day. It was on pay-per-view and it was very successful. So maybe it's time that NASCAR looked at having a track host a Cup race at Eldora, and give that part of the country, some national exposure, because Eldora really doesn't get a lot of national exposure, which is kind of sad, even though Tony Stewart, does own it. One of the main series that runs on there, like I said, was the World of Outlaw Sprint Car Series, and they had the annual Kings Royal, which is a popular race. So hopefully one day NASCAR can go to a track like Eldora and give those fans, a NASCAR Cup race and let those fans enjoy and bring in a lot of money. And I'm assuming if that were to happen, the tickets would sell out in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and I really feel for Bristol because I feel like they deserve 2 dates on the calendar, one spring and then the Bristol night race. But if they can't improve crowds the way they are, and if they can't get this dirt experiment under control with the topics that we've mentioned, yeah, it's definitely time to check out Eldora or Knoxville or somewhere else like that. And I'm really hoping they can get this turned around. But I'm afraid there's like a disconnect between how we and everyone in the online community is thinking the track prep is going for Bristol, and then the way they talk about it on the broadcast. If you were just listening to Fox talk about it, you think it's going great. And I know that they're paid to do that, but and they wouldn't do anything otherwise. But yeah, it's definitely time to look things over. It's some improvement. That's great. But going to next year, I think the novelty is wearing off for some folks, and if you can't make the money match up with it, it's not feasible. It's not right to continue, and just put it back on asphalt.
Thank you. Or concrete, like it is now at Bristol. It's called.
The problems, yeah, right, concrete. The problems began with Bristol. This is a side note. The problems began with Bristol whenever they reconfigured it from that 2003 configuration.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe in the future, Bristol can go back to asphalt like it used to be instead of the concrete. And looking at the Bristol spring race compared to the Bristol night race, you look at the Bristol night race, the grandstand is absolutely packed. That is one of the most highly anticipated NASCAR race on the schedule. But when you look at the spring race, which has traditionally been in the daytime, I don't know what's going on there, but it's just really hard for NASCAR to sell tickets. to that event, maybe you consider moving the Bristol Spring Race, bring it back to the regular surface, and maybe put it in May or June later on in the year, and maybe they'll see some improvement there because starting this earlier in the year, you see the rain and all of that causing all the issues, and I think that also leads to why people would rather invest in the Bristol night race than the spring race. And thinking that Bristol should have 2 races a year, if they can't get the spring date under control, it's going to become, I really hate to say this, but it might become harder to justify having 2 races at Bristol on the schedule. And I know, Ben, you've talked about this time and time again, that you believe that NASCAR should only go, to tracks once per year, and maybe that would fit into the equation where we only go to the Bristol night race. So if people want to see one Bristol race weekend, they go later on in the year, and then just drop the spring race or whatever. Maybe they replace Bristol dirt and go to a real dirt track. I know NASCAR would prefer, be at SMI own racetracks, and SMI does own dirt tracks. They have a dirt track right outside Charlotte Motor Speedway. They have a dirt track right outside Texas Motor Speedway. And if you really want a dirt race that badly, or the Las Vegas Motor Speedway dirt track, if you really want a dirt race that bad on the Cup Series schedule, maybe invest in the infrastructure in those racetracks, and you can potentially host a dirt race there, so you don't necessarily have to try to cut a deal with Eldora, something like that. Try to find a way to bring them to Knoxville, because if they wanted to race a Charlotte dirt, they could do that, or the other dirt tracks that I mentioned. As for the future of Bristol dirt, I'm not sure if they're going to bring it back next year, but it seems like reaction from the drivers have been mixed. Some drivers said they had a good time, while others, like Kevin Harvick, said they really didn't like it. And I think one quote Harvick made after he got out of the car, retired from the race, it was really interesting, and he's absolutely right. He said the ratings are gonna tell the true story if we're gonna come back and do this again next year. If the ratings are great, then sure, we're probably gonna see Bristol Dirt come back in 2023, and they didn't confirm that the event was coming back next year. So it's gonna be interesting to see what they're going to do. And the other question I asked, is it time for NASCAR to end this dirt experiment? I'm not so sure about that. I really want this experiment to work, but I'm not really sure what more they can do. Maybe listen to Kyle Larson and see what they can do about taking out the windshield and finding a way to put on a NASCAR race like that in a safe manner. And I just feel like overall that NASCAR Cup Series on dirt will work better at a traditional dirt track that's actually a dirt track, not just bringing in multiple dump trucks to just dump a pile of dirt on a concrete surface.
I want to circle back to a couple of points I missed, because it was a fairly loaded question there. That's why I kind of lost my place there for a second. But, I'm a firm believer in doing things right, quality over quantity. And, like I said, not opposed to dirt in principle, but we have to make sure, we're not doing it just to check off a box and say we did something we haven't done in half a century or whatever. If we're going to have a dirt race, let's do it right, and let's go to a purpose-built dirt track rather than spending. I mean, this is the other thing people need to think about here. It's not like a video game where you can just select a different track and, it magically appears for you. It takes, hours upon hours of effort and money and resources to convert it to a dirt track. And then you have to undo it all for the fall race and then come back and do it all again next year. And, you're on that cycle 2 times a year. Wouldn't it make more sense to go to Charlotte or, Las Vegas, which has hosted K&N West races before it, just a few years ago even, and host a dirt race there at a track that already exists that you only need to prep for stock cars and don't need to, literally convert and pour a ton of dirt on the surface for. I think that that's something that they should consider as well. And also, Kobe, you brought this up as well. I think everybody knows I guest contribute to lastcar.info with Brock Beard, and Brock and I are on the same side of this issue, that every track should only have one date. Even the Bristols, even the Talladegas, even the Daytonas. I would say if you have to have a second date at Daytona, run one of them on the road course, just to at least get some variety there. When you have a track with a second date, there's a reason why, holidays and crown jewel events like this, they only happen once a year. It keeps us wanting to come back for more without overexposing us to something that's truly special. And, Bristol is one of those tracks. I think that, maybe that's part of the reason why the spring race lost some of its luster, and NASCAR decided to go down this road of creating a dirt track. And, it obviously has not been all smooth sailing. It hasn't universally been praised from everybody. So, there's a lot of different issues to consider here. We have a comment as well from Joe coming back in the chat here. Thoughts on rotating the schedule so Bristol and other tracks host 2 races every other season. That's something that might be interesting. I think there's the case I've always made is the schedule is probably a little bit too long. So go to 28 to 32 different races at 28 to 32 different tracks, but maybe for TV rights or whatever, you'd have to keep it at 36. So maybe some tracks would get 2 dates. You could pick 4 tracks that have 2 dates and give them 2 races a year, and then those tracks would rotate. Something I hadn't considered before, but maybe NASCAR could consider going down that road if they wanted to continue to expand the schedule. Who knows what the future holds? I know they're at least trying some different things, and we have to give them credit where it's due there. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit up here and turn a blind eye to things that go wrong when we're trying these new things. I think it's important to remain objective, and let's give credit where it's due for not just doing the same thing over and over again, but also let's make sure the sport's the best that we can be. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that. I know there's a lot of layers to that question here. Otherwise, we'll go into the next segment. But does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I can say, if NASCAR wants to have a couple, at least have 2 dates on at places like Bristol, Charlotte, Daytona, Darlington, Martinsville, some of the more traditional tracks that have always had 2 dates. You go back to the 70s and 80s, 90s. I know it's hard for springtime in Bristol. You mentioned due to weather, but you think about it. There's always been a spring race at Darlington, always been a fall race at Darlington with the Southern 500, always been 2 dates at Talladega, always been 2 dates at Daytona with the Daytona 500 and the race on the 4th of July. So, at least have 2 dates at some of the more traditional tracks in the schedule, that people love. So if they can't go to the Daytona 500 with that, at least they can go like in the fall, or something like that.
There are definitely a lot of layers to consider there. I've always just thought, on the side of, NASCAR is really the only major motorsports organization and league, up until I guess recently with the COVID pandemic, kind of forcing the hands of people trying to get as many races in on the schedule as possible, doing a lot more double headers and things like that. But even when IndyCar does double headers, it's usually, a race on Saturday and a race on Sunday. NASCAR is really the only one where you come to one track in the spring and then go back to it in the fall. So, it's something that makes us a little bit unique in that aspect. Looks like we lost Brandon. Hopefully we'll get him back here in a second. But in the meantime, let's move on to our Racers Spotlight here. And let me see if I can pull the graphic up here. There we go. Sophia Flourish, a great result for her, 2nd overall and in class, the highest finishing female driver in LMP2 history. Our own Daniel Zeri was at Paul Ricard's circuit to follow her and the Iron Dames. Samantha Tan, Ashton Henry Harrison, and our own driver analyst Aaron Vogel all raced at Sonoma. Their class finishes are listed on the graphic. Here are their overall results in race 1 and race 2. Vogel was 10th and 12th overall. Harrison 6th and 11th. Tan 8th and 10th. Haley Deegan picked up a top 20 on the Bristol Dirt Track in the Truck Series. We'll talk a little bit more about that race, obviously, very shortly. Also of note, she's not on graphic, but Stuart Friesen's wife Jessica attempted to qualify, but unfortunately missed the race for the 2nd year in a row. At least she did get to run the heat races last year. Of course, last year she missed because everything got rained out and she had no points to fall back on. But be sure to follow RacerBehindTheHelmet.com. The link to that is in the description to follow even more women in motorsport and everything that they're doing in the world of racing. On to our black racers and African-American drivers. Bubba Wallace finished 28th in a tough week for 23XI racing as a whole. Kurt Busch was down in the 30s as well. So a tough weekend for that team. At least Wallace was up in the top 10 for part of the race, but ended up falling back. Good news for him, though. NASCAR will be back at Talladega next weekend, and that is the site of his first career win in the Cup Series. He also has 2 second-place finishes at Dover within the last calendar year, so Wallace certainly will be hoping for a good run there. None of the Racing Pride ambassadors were on track this weekend. However, Abby Eaton is an ambassador, and her partner, Jessica Hawkins, on track. She took 9th in the first race and won the second race of TCR UK weekend in Alton Park. So congratulations to her on another win. We encourage everyone to visit racingpride.com to learn more about the LGBTQIA plus community in the motorsport industry. And now we will go over to Kobe for an update on the grid ranking.
Yeah, and it's week 3 of the grid ranking, and week 3 doesn't have any NASCAR drivers in the top 10 anymore after Ross Chastain fell out after his blown engine at Bristol Dirt led to a DNF. And surprisingly, 4 IndyCar races are in the top 10, most out of any series in the grid ranking. Will Power has a 100% top 10 and top 5 finish rate. Alex Palou, the defending IndyCar champion, a 100% top 10 rate. Scott McLaughlin, Joseph Newgarden had 2 podium finishes in the first 3 races, and the top 6 remain the same. Are you surprised to see how Will Power, Alex Palou, Scott McLaughlin, and Joseph Newgarden are off to a strong start in IndyCar compared to everyone else?
Absolutely. Right there, those are drivers who have a legitimate shot, to win the championship. Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin drive for Roger Penske. Alex Palou is the defending NTT IndyCar Series champion. Will Power also has had a strong start to the season. And to see those names in the top 10 of the grid ranking, kind of impressive. And also give a call to Supercars driver Chas Mostert, who is in 10th. So we can now, so we can say a former Supercars champion is first, and a current Supercars driver is 10th. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, it's early in the grid ranking, but to see all those IndyCar stars up there, that's really impressive as a whole for the entire series.
It's not a surprise to see any of those 4 drivers running so well and having such a great start to the season. Obviously 3 of them drive for Team Penske, 1 drives for Ganassi. So, obviously no surprise to see those teams and those drivers running up front. I suppose it is a little bit of a surprise if the top 10 in the grid ranking is so heavily weighted towards IndyCar drivers. Maybe that'll even out a little bit more as other series continue to hold their season and have more races. But, a great start nonetheless for all those guys. And Adam, like you mentioned, any one of them I think could be in contention for a championship as we move on and the season continues.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be interesting to see if these IndyCar drivers can maintain their strength in the grid ranking and if they can contend for the grid ranking world championship at the end of the year. I know traditionally in the grid ranking, we don't usually see IndyCar drivers up there fighting for the grid ranking championship, but so far Team Penske and Palou, it really seems like it's them versus the field right now, and they're going to get a little time off. Not really time off, because we have the IMS oval test coming up, a 2-day test where they're going to get in the super speedway arcade and start to tune on their setups for this year's 106th Indy 500. And then the following weekend, they're going to be back racing in Alabama at Barber Motorsports Park. And since then, it's interesting to see if any other drivers and teams can match Team Penske and Alex Palou. And now looking at the full grid ranking, there are only 2 NASCAR drivers in the top 20, Ross Chastain and William Byron. Kyle Larson, the biggest surprise, the 3rd highest, 23rd, and only has a 44% top 5 and top 10 finish rate. Is it surprising that Kyle Larson, the defending NASCAR Cup Series champion, hasn't gotten off to a stronger start?
Well, first off, I just want to say, as a grid ranking member, this is my first time being acquainted with the grid ranking on a broadcast, and but yeah, it's not too surprising that Kyle Larson is in. He's at 23rd. He got that 1 win early at Fontana in the year, but other than that, he's kind of been struggling to keep the dominance that he had last year. Of course, with the ending of the Gen 6 era, Kyle Larson just had a superb year and took that championship with ease. and I think he's having some growing pains into the Gen 7 car. But I still, as I tell Ben several times every week, I think it's still early, and I think we have a lot more to go before we get into the summer slump. We'll see how things shake out then for Kyle Larson.
Yeah, you could I don't know if you could call it a sophomore slump.
I said summer. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay, Brandon. Could we say Kyle Larson right now is in a sophomore slump after what we saw last year? Well, it sort of looks like it. His only win, like you guys mentioned, came at Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California. Yeah, it's a new car, but I think we'll see Kyle Larson win a few more times this year. We all know this coming weekend is Sweet Home Talladega, Alabama, a track where, as Larry McReynolds has said, anybody can win this race. It does not matter where you start. So Kyle Larson has a good shot to win this weekend at Talladega and improve his grid ranking. But to see him have a slow start to the season, yeah, like you mentioned, Brandon, it's early. But I think once we head into summer, we'll know how Kyle Larson does, overall in the grid ranking.
I'm actually going to disagree with you, Adam, about Kyle Larson at Talladega. You look at Kyle Larson's history on super speedways. He's either flipping or caught up in some type of wreck. His luck is atrocious at Daytona and Talladega. So yeah, you're right that Kyle Larson has a shot of winning because anything can happen at a track like Talladega that's so unpredictable, and the draft is obviously so key. But I would not pick Kyle Larson for my pick a winner this week at Talladega, just given his history on these super speedway tracks. And I think you're right, Brandon. It is early. Kyle Larson's already in the playoffs, got that win at Fontana. I think just the biggest surprise to me that we haven't seen that same dominant form that we saw all throughout last season, but we've only gotten through a small chunk of the schedule, and there's time for Larson and his 5 team to start clicking off good results just like he had last night at Bristol Dirt. And I think he can use the result from Bristol Dirt to start to build some momentum as we head into the summer months to get this team back to performing at the same level we saw last year.
Just wait till Charlotte. I think that's when you're going to see him start clicking.
All right.
Or even before then.
All right. Mark that down, folks. Our own Brandon Crossland said that Kyle Larson will start to get going for the Coca-Cola 600. It's NASCAR's longest race of the season.
He loves it.
That's right.
That's about where
daytime to nighttime. So it'll, you could sort of say it's an experiment, for this next gen car, because we've never had a race start the day and end at night, and it's the longest race on NASCAR schedule. So we're 100 miles in this new next gen car. It's going to be interesting.
That's about when he got started on his hot streak last season too. We all know how that went. So a lot to consider here. I do agree with all of you. I think Kyle Larson certainly has a shot to win. But who are we kidding? It's Talladega. I'm probably going to have to create like a basket of names and just pick one out at random. That's going to be my pick a winner. It's just so impossible to predict what's going to happen. But we'll know in 1 week's time when we're wrapping it up here on the Wrap Up and Encore show. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, getting back to this weekend and the Truck Series, which took place Saturday night before the Cup Series race, of course. Defending Truck Series champion Ben Rhodes was the one who took victory in Saturday night's truck race. And while Rhodes, of course, won the championship last season, it was his first race victory since Daytona last year when he went back-to-back on the oval and road course to open the season at Daytona. Rhodes has only one finish outside the top 5 all season and also leads the point standings at the moment, though he does only have one win to Zane Smith's 2 victories so far this year. So here's a question, Brandon, we'll go to you first since you're the Encore regular here on the program. Can Ben Rhodes join Matt Crafton and do what he did in 2013-14 and become only the second driver ever to go back-to-back and win consecutive Truck Series championships?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, they're in the same type of equipment there with the same team. And Ben Rhodes had a had a way to victory last year with the championship. I think a lot of the Truck Series getting down to their championship has to do with being at the right place at the right time. And a lot of their races kind of just end up being the overtime finish. Who's going to be there at the end? And Ben Rhodes has been able to do that. And he's been shown, he showed the other night that he's capable of adapting to weird circumstances, being on the dirt. And I think Ben Rhodes can go for a back-to-back championship and match up with Matt Crafton.
Yeah, I agree, Brandon. I think Ben Rhodes can do it. He's in a strong truck at Thor Sports, and there's so much good talent in the Truck Series this year. You think of drivers like Grant Infinger, Christian Eckes, among others. So I think Ben Rhodes can go back to back. He's a very talented driver and good equipment. So I think he can do it.
Yeah, Ben Rhodes has certainly had a lot of strong runs, even though he hasn't broken into victory lane in a while. Obviously he's a champion for a reason, and has certainly come into his own and done great things with Thor Sport. And I have no doubt that, especially in this playoff format, he did it once, he can do it again and go back to back. There is a long season ahead of us, though, so we will have to wait and see there. Now, another driver that had a strong run in the truck race was 19-year-old Carson Hilsevar. Hilsevar led 55 laps, looked like he might be on course for his first career win. Ended up tying his best career result with a second-place finish. Nice are still looking as a team for their first win since Ross Chastain went on that magical run in 2019. So, Kobe, we'll go to you this time. Is Hilsevar the new face of Nice Motorsports in the Truck Series?
Well, Ben, I think you can definitely say that Carson Hilsevar is certainly the new face of Nice Motorsports, because you look at Carson Hilsevar's performance compared to his teammates, he's literally blowing his other three teammates out of the water. I know we typically compare teammate performances in Formula One for the most part. We don't usually do that a lot in NASCAR, but I think worth noting Carson Hilsevar. If you had to like grade his performances in the Truck Series, I think you can give him like an A-, B+, and then for his teammates, hate to be so harsh, you're getting in like the C-, D+ territory, and it's showing you how good. How I think it just shows you how good Carson Hilsevar is as a driver, maximizing the performance of the truck, because Carson Hilsevar can finish in the top 5, and then you look at his teammates and they're outside the top 15 and sometimes outside of the top 20. And I mean this, no disrespect to Dean Thompson, Chris Wright, and Wallace Allen, but I really feel like that Carson Hilsevar is on an entirely different level than those three, and I feel like he's certainly the team leader at Nice Motorsports. And whenever on occasion you see Ross Chastain hop in another Nice Motorsports truck, the fourth entry, I know we saw that at Atlanta, Ross Chastain was able to do the same type of things we've seen Carson Hilsevar do in that truck. And I don't know what the problem is with the other Nice trucks, but Carson Hilsevar right now, it seems like Nice really needs to invest a lot in him to make sure that they can keep giving him fast trucks so he can finally get that long-awaited victory and lock himself into the playoffs.
Yeah, Carson Hilsevar, I've crossed paths with him a couple of times at the Nashville Fairgrounds with the All-American 400 before, and standing there with him with Matt, he's just a real down-to-earth sort of guy and a really, really talented race car driver. And he's really the class of Nice Motorsports, that's for certain. I mean, his competition is Dean Thompson, Chris Wright, and a guy named Lawless Allen, which is a really cool name, by the way, to name your kid Lawless. But Carson Hilsevar, he's a class of Nice Motorsports, and he's really shown his prowess on dirt. Really hungry the other night, and doing it for Brian Clausen, the late Brian Clausen, and had that under his fire suit. Was really wanting that victory for the Clausen family. And I'd say look out for Carson at Knoxville this year, and anywhere else he can get himself up front. He's got a really fast truck there at Nice Motorsports.
Yeah, it's been nice to see Nice kind of rebound a little bit with Carson. And, I know there was a lot of talk when Ross Chastain was going on that improbable championship run. I think it's easy to forget he didn't even start the season running for Truck Points. He was supposed to be in an Xfinity car with Chip Ganassi, and then the whole DC Solar FBI raid happened, and that shot that down, obviously. But, I think there was a lot of talk when he was having his run about Nice getting a lot of equipment and trucks from GMS. And, was he driving a Nice truck or really, a GMS truck in many respects? And I think, you've seen Nice's performance drop off the last couple of years. Carson has elevated that back again. It's great to see. And, we want to talk about potential first-time winners in the Cup Series. I think it's only a matter of time before Hilsevar gets that monkey off his own back and finally breaks through to victory lane. He could have done it very easily Saturday night. The roads just was a little bit better there at the end, and that was the difference. But I'm sure that win's coming for Carson. Now, another driver I want to highlight, Parker Kligerman. Another impressive run for him, picking up another top 5 and finishing in 4th place here. Kligerman is still very active in television right now for NBC Sports, but he's continued to run a partial schedule with Henderson Motorsports and the number 75 team. He even scored a win for them a few years back at Talladega in 2017. So, Adam, we'll go to you first here. How impressive has Kligerman been balancing his work both on the air, what he's doing, hosting shows for NBC, and also maintaining his results on the track?
It's impressive what Parker Kligerman is doing. I got to give him props for it. He actually hosts all the MotoGP coverage for NBC Sports. I believe so. Him doing that, and then, like you mentioned, driving for Henderson Motorsports. To give the fans some perspective, Henderson Motorsports has been around for a long time. Think back to when the Xfinity Series was known as Busch Series. They had a driver named Brad Teague who drove for him a lot. And actually, when the Xfinity Series, back then called the Busch Series, went to Bristol, Brad Teague was always up there, battling out for top 5s, top 10s, and even top 20s, So, what Parker Kligerman is doing, on a partial schedule for Henderson Motorsports is impressive. And, I think he'll win this year, for Henderson Motorsports. I don't know where, but I think it really can't happen.
Yeah, I'm also very impressed by Parker Kligerman. He's really involved in the sim racing side of things, especially during the pandemic, especially. But yeah, the work he does with NBC Sports as the pit lane reporter, I know he's going to be an inspiration to a lot of young kids that are growing up seeing Parker Kligerman as the pit reporter now, and in the same way that Matt Yoakum and folks like that inspired us. But I'm also impressed with his driving capabilities and that partial schedule with Henderson Motorsports. He's always seeming to find himself up there in at least the top 15. Anytime you look at the board, there he is, that 75 truck, and the races that he does enter. And I think he's going to get another win here, hopefully this season, and might come at a place like Talladega.
Yeah, of course, Talladega is the site of his 2 wins already in the Truck Series. And, you talk about Brad Keselowski racing a lot of times. People mention how many drivers came through that program and are now in the Cup Series or have had successful NASCAR careers. Parker was a part of that program as well for a point in his career. And, he's somebody that I think if a full-time opportunity were to come up for him, I don't know how committed he is to the television side of things. He certainly has a career set for him in that if he wants it. But I think, in terms of his talent behind the wheel, certainly capable of another full-time opportunity should one come his way as well. And he continues to prove it every time he gets into a truck that maybe doesn't have the budget or the equipment of one of the top teams. Heck, they're only a part-timer team when it comes to their scheduling. I think Parker has certainly earned the most of his opportunities, and it's great to see him continue to have success when he does make an appearance in the driver's seat and then turn right back around, change his fire suit out for a broadcast suit, and then go do some great things over at NBC Sports. So, it's great to see him continue to have success. And I'm with you guys. I think he certainly is capable of getting another win. If he keeps running like this, he might not even have to wait until we get to Talladega. It might happen before then. So who knows what the future holds this year for Parker Kligerman. Now, shifting gears here, I guess, from NBC Sports over to Fox Sports. Another thing, I know we've talked about this several times so far this season, but social media was really fired up Saturday night in regard to the Fox Sports coverage.
Yep.
Never mind the cookie discussion that was going on in the broadcast booth with Kurt Busch.
I like that. Okay. That was nice.
I have to say, in fairness, I think Kurt Busch has done a very good job, and he's somebody that, at the end of, he's probably in the twilight of his career, at least full-time in cup racing. I think he's done a solid job as well, but the whole cookie thing, I don't know. Like mentioning it a couple times, I think was in good fun, but it reminded me a little bit of a shake and bake coverage. I have to admit, it was weird how much they were obsessing over it in the middle of the race, but like I said, never mind that. I want to talk about what happened at the end of the race here. What was most frustrating to a lot of people, I think, 13 laps to go, FS1 went to commercial. And they did that with 13 to go at Bristol. I know it's a little bit slower per lap on the dirt, but it's still a place where the laps only take 20 seconds to take place. So, do the math. How much time do we actually have in the race? And Fox is only going to commercial with just 13 laps left. And, in complete fairness, it was a side-by-side commercial, but two of the commercials that were featured in that break were for NASCAR and for the Fox Nation streaming service. So essentially, NASCAR on Fox was taking a commercial that late in the race to advertise NASCAR and Fox. So, that makes things even more perplexing. So, I'll let everybody chime in here on this one, including you, Adam. I know we don't have your name in the scripts here, but everybody can feel free. We'll have kind of a roundtable discussion here.
Sure.
What does this say about the production team at Fox Sports and how seriously they're taking things that they were willing to try to squeeze in one last commercial break with 13 laps to go at Bristol coming down to the finish there?
Well, so from someone who's used to work in some TV production and still works in radio production, I'd say this speaks more about who is controlling those that control Fox Sports right now than I think it says more about the suits up above them than it does the actual production team. And I know we've been giving them a lot of hate, quote unquote, or just tough criticism because we want it to be well. We want it to be a good product that they put on their part of the calendar. But it's just been hard it's been hard to keep silent about the increasing zooming in and all and whatnot. And then you have things like this where at a track that's so short, and then you get two commercials. And like you said, Ben, not only are they taking up precious laps at the end of the race, they're also about themselves. They're about NASCAR and Fox. And, that's when I think, well, it's probably not about the director of the broadcast. It's probably more about, okay, we got this quota for this, and this. We haven't done these yet. We got to do these soon. And then this is where they go, well, we fit it in now. We're not going to make it. We're not going to have enough time. Just fit it in now. And so, yeah, I think the person above the production technical director and director needs to have a reevaluation of where their priorities are and how to put on an effective broadcast as far as when are these are the most important moments. Like in basketball broadcasting, we have a kind of an oath, like at the end of when it's like 5 minutes before the game is over, you do not go if you can keep from it, you do not go to break at all. No 30-second breaks. You go all the way to the final whistle.
Yeah, and for me, the one thing that I really wish that NASCAR could do is do what they have in Formula One, where Mother's Polish, pays all the spots for the commercials, so we can have commercial-free coverage. I'm sure a lot of people feel really happy to have a commercial-free NASCAR race on, and I know with streaming becoming more popular, maybe in the future NASCAR invests on a streaming option where you can have a commercial-free race if you pay for it. So maybe that could be an option down the road in the future, but I'm not really sure what sponsor would be willing to step up and do that. But in the meantime, we're stuck with what we have right now. And as far as production on the broadcast, there's been a lot of questionable things going on, not just NASCAR on Fox, also NASCAR NBC as well. And we only call this stuff out and criticize it because we as we've been saying, we want this to be the best product possible for all the viewers watching at home. And I don't really have any solutions of what they can potentially do better. I just like you mentioned, Ben, with only a handful of laps to go on a short track like Bristol. Those laps fly by. If we were racing on the regular Bristol track, if you had to step out, you use the bathroom and go do something right quick on another room, you come back and the race is going to be over, because that's how quickly the laps fly by at Bristol, and just only a couple of minutes. And overall, just one thing I wanted to point out that's actually positive about the Fox broadcast. I thought the pre-race show they did this week, I know a lot of people typically avoid those because it can get very cringeworthy at times. I thought they handled pre-race as best as I've seen Fox handle it in a very long time. I thought it kept me engaged. It was informative for the most part. And I was thinking to myself, why can't Fox put on a pre-race program like this every single week?
Yeah, Kobe, I completely agree with you about the Fox, about the pre-race show on Sunday, especially with yesterday being Easter Sunday. A lot of people went to church yesterday, like myself, and so what they did on the pre-race show, or even before the pre-race show, when they talked about the meaning of Easter, I think that was really, really cool. And hopefully they'll do something like that again in the future. But getting back to the production, I thought it was, it's really nice to see different NASCAR drivers in the broadcast booth every week with Vince Welch and Mike Waltrip. I gotta say, Kurt Busch, I thought he did a good job last night, and I like how they rotate, for every race. But I agree with you, Colby. What Fox should do, there are a lot of different sponsors in NASCAR, so why can't they have, a commercial? And I like the comment for our own Joe Samiego. He says, "I like the GRIDnet work. Free show's the best." Joe, amen. I think it's always fun to do the pre-race show and the post-race show, and so we don't have to deal with any commercials, while we're out in the air. So, but I gotta say, I like how they rotate, different drivers, for each NASCAR broadcast on Fox, especially on Sunday when they're going to have Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the broadcast booth. Big props to NBC Sports for allowing that to happen. So hopefully it continues in the future.
I don't want to do our sponsor, public.com, complete disservice. We do take one ad before and after the show for them. So we do a little bit of commercials here, but nothing to the extent that Fox and the TV networks do, obviously. I'm also going to, yeah, of course, link in the description, like you said. Also going to make a shameless plug here, even though, I know I write for him, so I might be a little biased, but Brock Beard has started a fantastic series on his YouTube channel, kind of documenting the problems with modern day NASCAR broadcasts. And it goes way deeper than, human errors that you might see in the broadcast booth. I want to be clear, I've never been in a broadcast booth myself. And, I have to go on to a secondhand account how many little small mistakes I've made here just on tonight's show. I'm not sitting up here on my high horse pretending that, the four of us are superior or perfect in any way. I know that live sports in any sport is a very difficult job to broadcast, let alone one that moves as fast as 200 miles per hour. That being said, it's something that needs to be done well at that level, and it's been done well by professionals, and it's been done well by Fox Sports. I love the Fox Sports coverage. When I was growing up, I think it's a shame that we've seen them, fall so far from a production standpoint. And last night was really no exception to the issues that we keep bringing up here. And Kobe, like you mentioned, we're not bringing this up, to be harsh or be rude or mean or anything like that. We're just sitting here because we want a good quality product, not just for us, but for all the viewers and, for new fans tuning in. I don't think it's a coincidence that, the boom that you've seen Formula One experience here in the United States has come in a period where Formula One is broadcast commercial free I say ESPN, of course, it's a Sky Sports Speed that's simulcast by ESPN, but regardless, they have a deal with Mother's Polish. Mother's Polish gets a lot of support and appreciation from Formula One fans because the races go commercial free, and I think that helps enhance the viewing aspects and experience for fans as well. And then you have the complete opposite here, where we're taking commercial with 13 laps to go at Bristol. I know it's split screen, but it's still not the same. And I think some Canadian fans were even saying that they didn't even get a split screen commercial, so they completely missed the accident that led to a final caution and the final restart there. So that's something that I hate to be blunt, but it's simply not acceptable. For a network that's been doing this for over 2 decades now, to still be running into issues like this. And I don't know if they want to save the ads for the end, because that's when they know everybody's watching and they can maybe charge more, for the advertising. But whatever the deal is, something needs to change, and it needs to change soon, because, like I said, last night is the rule now rather than the exception. And it's unfortunate that we're sitting here talking about it once again.
Yeah, Ben, I agree with everything that you said. Forget our viewers, from our international viewers from, the UK, Australia, I don't know if they have commercial free, on air, like we, over there. But I think it would be kind of nice here in the United States. Hopefully one day we can with NASCAR. I mean, there's so many sponsors, in NASCAR that, I don't see why they couldn't. Have a commercial free broadcast. I mean, even streaming, if a fan wanted to do that, I mean, hey, it's an option, that NASCAR could look at into the future.
Yeah. And I'll just say one more thing here. If the onboard cameras are sponsored, if the white flag is sponsored, I mean, how many sponsors and advertisements do we have in NASCAR these days? Don't tell me that there wouldn't be interest from some corporate sponsorship opportunity for somebody to come in and help present the coverage. And people draw the comparison all the time to soccer. This really is the only sport where we take commercial breaks in the middle of the action, because even in soccer, where the clock never stops, you have advertising banners on the perimeter of the stadium, and you have players with sponsorships on their jerseys and everything. So it's not like you're free from the sponsorship and advertisements, but you don't have to interrupt the actual in-game action to do it. Why can't NASCAR do the same? I think it's a valid question.
Thank you, Ben. I completely agree with you. And with that all being said, it's now time for our Grid 1 Shining Moment from this motorsports weekend. The only action now we saw was the action at Bristol Motor Speedway in the hills of Eastern Tennessee. So, with that being said, I'll start with you, Brandon. What's your Grid 1 Shining Moment from this motorsports weekend?
A one shining moment from the Thunder Valley would have to be Chase Briscoe and Tyler Reddick coming to terms with each other. I know it's probably going to be somebody else's, but since I'm first here on the script, I can take it first. It's mine. Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe not fighting at the end, kind of just laughing about it at the end. That was really a breath of fresh air, as Joe mentioned in the comments section earlier, and was the highlight for me for the whole weekend.
I was going to mention that, but I was also going to mention a couple of drivers. I think I've already mentioned them tonight, actually, in the beginning of the show. I want to give a call to Daniel Suarez and Ty Dillon as well, a couple of guys who have had to work so hard for the opportunities that they've gotten, have bounced around for multiple teams, didn't get the win or the result that they were maybe looking for last night, but they are knocking on the door and having some really solid runs this season. Suarez in particular, when you look at how well Trackhouse has run, I think it's only a matter of time before he finds victory lane and to get up there. And I think he led more laps than he has in any one race in his career last night. So, it was a great run for him. And it looked like, if Mother Nature had been just a little bit more severe in Tennessee last night, he might have gotten his first win right then and there. He was running so well. And it's unfortunate that things went a little bit south for him at the end there. But, still a great run nonetheless. And proof that, Trackhouse, I don't think this is any fluke here. Ross Chastain's already punched his ticket to the playoffs. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with as the season continues.
my grid one shining moment comes from GT World Challenge America, the second and final race of the weekend from their Pro-Am category. And also, we talked about them a little bit in our driver spotlight. I have to give a big shout out to Ashton Harrison Henry, our driver analyst for IMSA coverage, Aaron Vogel and Samantha Tan. I was watching that race before the Bristol Dirt race yesterday. I was very impressed with all of their performances. Ashton Harrison Henry, she was actually battling for the lead in the GT3 Pro-Am category. Had a really great battle with Charlie Luck there at the end. She needed about 2 or 3 more laps, and I feel like she would have passed him to win the class. It was really strong performance by Ashton and Samantha Tan. Her co-driver Nick Whitner did not have the best start, got stuck deep in the field, and she got into the car and she literally stormed through the field, passing car after car. That was such a mega drive by Samantha, being able to do that in that BMW and setting some really blistering lap times. And Samantha, she's also the winner of the 12 Hours of Mugello that took place just several weeks ago, and she's running in GT World Challenge America this year. So Samantha keeping up the momentum, and Aaron Vogel, our driver analyst for IMSA coverage here at Grid Network, had a strong run as well in the Acura. I know the speed wasn't necessarily there with the BOP for her this weekend and her teammate Michael Cooper, but they'll look at the data, evaluate, and they'll move on to the next round of GT World Challenge America. I also wanted to read a tweet from Twitter from @ShaneBurke_17 saying, if you have a daughter who needs a female driver to look up to in America, then give Ashton Harrison Henry and Samantha Tan a follow. Mentioned there was some mega drives from them, and watched Samantha's on board and was really impressed with her performance. And Ashton responded to the tweet saying that, adding that Aaron Vogel is also a great pick as well. To just show you, that people are watching, representation matters. And that's my great one shining moment for this racing weekend.
Well, for me, it's a very special day for me because it's Patriots Day in Massachusetts, and I was born outside of Boston in a city called Malden, Massachusetts. And for the first time in 3 years, the Boston Marathon took place, and we actually had a former NASCAR Cup champion compete in that, Matt Kenseth. He finished the 26.2 mile marathon in 3 hours, 1 minute, and 40 seconds. We've seen other NASCAR drivers compete in that. We've seen Jimmy Johnson compete in that marathon. As well, we see Michael Waltrip, compete in that race as well. And that takes a lot of endurance, a lot of training, and if you've never watched the Boston Marathon, I highly encourage it. It's a very hilly course. It starts in the town of Hopkinton, Massachusetts, and it ends in the city of downtown Boston. So, to see Matt Kenseth, compete in that race and have the race go off for the first time in 3 years, due to the COVID-19 pandemic was really special. So for me, seeing Matt Kenseth compete in the Boston Marathon and having the Boston Marathon come back as a whole is my grid one shining moment from this weekend.
Yeah, not just the fact that he ran it, the fact that he did so well. Matt Kenseth doing 26.2 miles at an average mile pace that, not a lot of people could run 1 mile at, let alone 26.2. So certainly we want to give our props to him. Great to see him out there. And, if Jimmy Johnson, I think when they said, when he crossed the line 3 years ago that he ran a Boston Marathon qualifier time, Matt Kenseth ran even faster than Jimmy did. So who knows? Maybe we'll see Matt Kenseth back again next year or sometime in the future. We'll just have to wait and see. But great to see him get that moment in the spotlight as well. And I've got to tell you, as an avid runner, I've got so much respect for everybody running that race. And like you said, Adam, great to see it back after a few years away due to COVID-19. So that's going to be it for another edition of both Grid Live Wrap-Up and Grid Live Encore here. A fun little combination show tonight. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We've got it all here at Grid Network. And if you really like what you see, you can take 5 minutes after the show to invest and consider joining our Patreon. Invest in Grid Network to help keep us on the air throughout 2022. And as always, a special thank you to Colin, Deshelle, Mark, and Robin, who have already done so. Your support's greatly appreciated. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can buy me a coffee. And as always, thanks to Ed, Amber, and Zachary for already doing so. You can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air talent, any one of us here that you saw on the show tonight, or anybody here at Grid Network. Any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet. As always, thank you to our sponsor, Public.com, the stock market social media home. The referral code GRIDnet in the link in the description box below will give you $5 to invest. Public.com allows you to connect with your friends, make new friends, and use tools to learn how to invest in the stock market. Now, Wednesday, Adam and Kobe will host Grid Tonight. As always, Thursday, Joe and Daniel have the Women in Motorsports program. And we will be back with Grid Live, the pre-race show on Saturday, the wrap-up show on Sunday. Brandon and I will see you right back here next Monday night for another episode of Grid Live Encore. We may have a couple special guests joining us as well. I know, Adam, you mentioned, you're excited for Talladega weekend, and big news, Larry McReynolds will be back on the crew chief box for a member of the Earnhardt family. So there's a lot to discuss there. Talladega with the Xfinity Series, and ARCA will be joining them as well. ARCA West is at Kern County Raceway Park. They'll be back in action this weekend, and Formula 2 and Formula 3 back as well. So we may even have Josh Birch on the show again. We'll have to wait and see. But they're joining F1 in Imola, so it's a much busier weekend than we had this week with Just for Truck Series. So for Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish, Adam Lemerise, Brandon Crossland, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you for watching. As always, have a wonderful week, everybody.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, Public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on Public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDNET for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on Public.com.